about Yep, we back. Continuing in our mission, diving forward, going right there into Nikias and different topics that highlight Stern prom. That's funny. Different topics where you can find this to be very prevalent. We talked about a little bit about Lashon Hara, and now we're going to go into another topic that has also just crazy amount of relevance till today, and even something that is, I mean, like, we all struggle with it, and we even discussed it a little bit this week in the personal sphere. Lying, not saying the truth, being dishonest, and not being totally honest and forthcoming. Um, and again, just before we dive in, that Nikias is not talking about outright just doing something like that's horrible. Like, we're not horrible human beings. We wouldn't do it like that. We wouldn't do it in a way where it's like, hey, if I can just not like I have to proactively use my self-awareness to like identify this Mida inside myself. That's what it is. It's to the depths and to the degree to expunge something entirely in its entirely. Because again, if a bad me does like cancer, you don't coexist with that. You don't say, all right, listen, we got rid of it in this part of the body, but we're going to leave it over there. Inevitably, it'll just spread and it'll take over. So lying. Let's talk about the toxicity of lying. So lying, page 74 at the top. Lying is a harmful sickness that is widespread amongst people. It consists of various levels, as do most things. There are people who are expert at lying. Right? It's like literally second nature. To the same degree that a person, could become any media that they want. They just have to work on it until it eventually becomes habitual, it becomes second nature, and then that's just their character at that point. So a person who is lying their whole life, and just of course you could get better at it. You could get better at any skill set. So somebody who's a total expert at lying, these are the one who continuously create total fabrication to promote conversations among people or to be considered wise and well informed. The internet, Exhibit A. I mean, there are some. I sometimes like I'm sitting there thinking like I like to sometimes watch some of the podcasts of the haters, and it's like inside my head, and I'm trying to like navigate whether or not like do they believe the garbage coming out of their mouth, or they just like legit. And I guess I'll never know really, unless they're like caught on a hot mic something, but that people can get up there and just lie about things, state facts and statistics and smear, just the Jewish people, the land of Israel. It's pretty remarkable, but without even flinching. Referring to them, it's been said, Shlomo Melech and Mishlei, lips that lie are an abomination of the eternal. And it says in Yesharim, your lips utter lies, your tongue gives voice to the injustice. Our sages of blessed memory have already decreed that there are four classes of people who are not received into the presence of the Shekhinah, and one of them is called the class of liars. That's pretty heavy. Okay, but we said that there's levels. So talking about somebody who just profusely just lies all the time. I don't know if you've ever met anyone like this. I have. When they talk about oh my God, what's the term? Was it um what's the term? It's escaping me here. The
Psychopath,
psychological
pathological liars.
pathological, thank you, pathological liar. Where it's really, really scary. If you've ever she's like, yeah, half my school. If you ever met somebody like that to that degree, it's actually very scary. That lying doesn't affect them in any which way emotionally. Like it's just again, it's these are the type of people you got to be very careful on. They can be outright dangerous. But yeah, I mean, when it's pathological at that stage, it's like it's actually very, very scary. But again, we don't know of such things. So let's talk about the other ones. Okay, then there are others who resemble them, although they're not exactly like them. Maybe just a level down, maybe. These are the people who distort things in their stories and their accounts. They embellish or fabricate or exaggerate, let's say. They are not, however, devoted craftsmen who fabricate stories and the events that never occurred, right? Like literally making something up that never actually happened, you know? And I would get like the kids are all like this, and it's funny how fast they get alienated by themselves, right? They are like there was whatever. I'm not gonna say any details, but there's a girl basically posting things on social media of like events and things that they like weren't there. Like they were finding other pictures from other people and like posting as if they were in that event or in that area. And it was like, and they got like exposed and people were like showing, they're just like, it's just crazy to the degree. Um, but then there's taking a real actual account of a story and then something that can't be verified and then, just fudging the facts there. Rather, when they relate something, they intercept it with, I'm sorry, intersperse it with lies that suits them, and they become a bit habituated to this until it becomes second nature to them, as I discussed a little bit earlier. And then it's just common. Like every time they're telling a story, it's like, oh, by the way, and I said this or she said that, or like it was, this is what happened, and it didn't actually happen in reality. But there are the liars whose words can never be believed, as the sages of blessed memory said in Gemara Sanhedrin, this is the fate of the liars. Even when he tells the truth, no one listens to him. Why? Boy cried wolf. And eventually, if you've developed yourself into a dishonest person, you're going to alienate yourself from other people because who on earth wants to be around that type of person? Even when they say the truth, you have to sort of question with, first of all, perfectly fine to have a clause against the person saying, well, if you lie all the time, how do we know you're not lying? No. And therefore, right, a person like that loses all their credibility, even if they are indeed telling the truth. I was friends with people of a certain ethnic group, of certain background, from a certain country, far out in Asia, maybe close to Russia. And a lot of them were just like crazy, everything. Like it was like a small little thing, and you would ask like a question on it, and then they would get so intense and start swearing to God like profusely. And it was like I wasn't suspicious before, but now with that performance, I am certainly don't believe you. They've already internalized this evil to such a degree that their words cannot emerge from their mouths free of distortion. This is what the prophet grieves over when he says, Yirmiyahu, they have accustomed their tongues to utter lies, and they've exhausted themselves with wrongdoings. Okay. So that's the next level down. Obviously, nobody here falls into that category. No one is just going to outright just make something up. It's actually it's a psychological phenomenon that people can I forgot what the oh my God, can't think of what it is. Anyway, they can take memories that actually happen and change them, and their memories are can actually be different. They can have a memory of a version of a story that happened in a way that it didn't actually happen. So it's really cool. Human mind is awesome. Anyway, there are still others whose malady is milder than that of the former. These are the ones who are not entrenched in lying, but who also not concerned about keeping their distance from it. If the opportunity arises, they will lie, though they will often lie with a joking manner or the like without any ill intent. Right? This is just we call it situational lying. Nonetheless, the wisest of them have instructed that all the contrary to the will of the Creator, blessed be He, and the virtue found among them is pious. This is what is written: the righteous hate false words. So even if, right, like let's say I could say like a joke, like this, and I've been there before where it's like the joke would be so much funnier if that's the way that it went. So like you just like when you're telling over the story, you like embellish it because like that adds emphasis to the actual story, even though it's not actually true. Now, it might be harmless in nature for sure. The real concern is just in terms of how we're conditioning ourselves to be. If we're comfortable with saying falsehoods in any capacity, then that would be a problem. It would be a problem. Um, We talked about, I guess, the difference between outright saying sheker, like lying, versus like misleading or hinting or nudging to something. All right. In this reference, it said the following prohibition was issued: you shall distance yourself from any falsehood, right? This is a midvar sheker tircha. Never tell a lie. It's a very famous mitzvah in the Torah, a very famous pasuk as well. Midvar sheker tircha, that you should distance yourself from falsehood, right? That if there is something that is just not emistic, and a person can sense when something is truly emistic, it's pure almost. It's like very, very ashar, right? And when you see that it's to the contrary, then a person should distance themselves from it. That's what it is to be a yid. And note that it does not say safeguard yourself from falsehood, but rather distance yourself from a falsehood to make us aware how we need to distance ourselves and flee from its escape. It has already been stated. Ah, in Safanya, the remnant of Israel should do no inquiry nor speak falsely, no should there be found in the mouths a deceived tongue. Right? We should have just we talked about it at the end of last year of the power of our words and how careful we need to be when it comes to saying certain things. Um, it's interesting because it's sort of, sometimes it makes it very easy to do it, but and sometimes you actually stand a lot to gain by just like, okay, don't be fully honest on, you know? So, so it's interesting. I got a call from somebody in Israel, and this happened today actually. And they called me up and they asked for a favor. They said, "Can I write them a letter, a religious exemption letter from the IDF?" And this person lives in Israel, last few years is in college. And I said, "Well, like, as I remember, you weren't the most religious person out there. Like, what's the story there?" I said, "No, I want to. I don't. It's not really that. I'm just trying to get out of the service. I just don't want to do it. It's like I'm in a stage of life, and I'm just not down. So, that's probably the most effective exemption that you can find." And I don't know. I was a little bit like weirded out by it. I was like, "Why don't you just?" They said, "Oh, in the application, they said, where are you in school?" In public school, wasn't in a Jewish school. And I'm thinking, like, why not just lie? Like, why not just say, because maybe they can find out, whatever. That's besides the point. But I said, listen, I gotta like think on this and like ask a little bit of advice because at the end of the day, like, do I want to be, I'm not lying. I can write a letter saying that, you were involved in a religious institution for a bunch of years. But knowing that what it's being used for is something that's technically, a lie. Kind of like I don't know. It didn't. It threw me off. It wasn't like I was so on board with that. So I'm speaking with people to see if that's something that is or isn't. But it's a lie, and it can. It's not necessarily something you want to be a part of or put your stamp of approval on. There's reminiscent of like the COVID days where like people were asking me right and left, and I read a lot of letters, SAT letters and letters that advocating for people that are Jewish and recommendations and stuff. Someone asked me, like at the time, like religious exemptions for COVID vaccines. And I'm like, listen, I'm not into the vax, I'm against the vax and all that good stuff. And yet I'm not going to write a letter saying that it says in our religion to some degree that you shouldn't be getting vaccinated. It's just stupid. It's not a thing. It's not what our religion believes in any way, shape, or form. So I just didn't feel good about doing that. I didn't want to write the letter. I didn't want to dive into that. Because there's an element of like, you want to be as truthful as you can. You don't want to dabble in that stuff because it's a slippery slope, and let's just call it a gateway drug. It can certainly lead to a lot more things. Um, like my Ravkov story, getting the minor, where you're 17, where you get twice as many bus rides as if you were 18, but I was 18, but I could pass for 17 years old or whatever. Or again, like it's very hard when you're standing there and your kid is a week after his 4-year-old birthday, and kids 3 and younger are free. So it's very tempting to just say like, oh yeah, they're 3. But these are the type of zachs that like you can't be comfortable with these things because when you're comfortable with these things, then you're getting yourself used to conditional lying and saying it's okay to lie. You justify it here, we're gonna justify it there, and stuff like that. Now, where does white lies come into the picture? Where is lying for the greater good, which is absolutely a concept, but that's a tough thing to navigate. So let's see if we get to that at all. But that's I think where it becomes a little bit more of a challenge. Anyway, so the sages of the blessed memory said in Gemara Shabbos, the stamp of the Holy One, blessed be He, is truth. Um, right? Chaisama shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes. And we know that it's one of the midos of Rachamim as well. Hashem kal rachon v'chanon erech apayim v'rav chesed v'emes. So being truthful is, and it was throwing shade when Yonah left it out of the speech, if you're familiar. And therefore, it is the Holy One, blessed be He, who chooses to stamp the truth as a stamp. How loathsome must it be opposite to Him, be to Him, the opposite be, yeah. Basically, Hashem loves truth. And when somebody is involved in Sheker, how much that Hashem despises that. Furthermore, the Holy One, blessed be He, has severely cautioned us about the truth when stating, speak the truth to one another. And He said in Yesharim, the throne of Mashiach, shut up, will be established with benevolence, and He will sit on it through truth. And He said, indeed, they are my nation, my sons, they will not lie. From here we learn that the former being called the Eternal's nation and his sons is dependent upon the latter, that they refrain from lying. Furthermore, he said, and Jerusalem will be called the city of truth, to magnify its value. The sages of blessed memory have already asked, and one who speaks the truth from the heart applies, for example, to the incident involving Rav Safra, etc., which teaches us how great one's obligation to speak the truth. Not familiar with the story of Rav Safra, but there is somebody here who probably deserves a shout out, who also was very easy to probably just make a lie, because didn't want to sort of deal with the backlash, and yet they just weren't comfortable with it. They wanted to be someone who did not dabble in falsehood because they know Hashem doesn't like it, and they ultimately said the truth. I hope we'll leave it at that. We won't highlight any further on it, but a lot of respect when people hold on to the truth. They've also forbidden a Torah scholar to alter his words except in three cases. And since one of the pillars, in which the world stands as the pillar of truth, right? That's in a later Mishnah, right? Echad mi hamudim sha'olam omed alav hu ha'emes. Anyone who tells a lie in this regard as if he's removed the foundation of the world. That's crazy if you think about it. That's very intense, right? One of the pillars that's holding up the world is the pillar of truth, and if a person speaks falsehood, it's like they're ripping out the support for the entire world. Conversely, one who is heeded in the truth is regarded as maintaining the foundation of the world, right? Mida connected mida. It's got to go both ways. The sage, it's very cool. You could see that when you talk about like the severity of an avera, that can also hint to you what the magnitude of the mitzvah is. That's on the opposite end of it, and vice versa. By the way, if you see a mitzvah gedola, which is hard to kind of say because we don't know exactly what the onesh is and the schar for mitzvos. For averas, yes, I'm sorry, but for mitzvos, no, we don't know. So it's hard to say what is big, what's not big. But via after akamocha zekla godol b'Torah, according to Rabbi Kiva. So therefore, messing with people or creating division amongst people could be just as like destroying the whole Torah. The sages of blessed memory have told us that the place where people are heedful to the truth and consequently the angel of death was perilous there. However, because the wife was when the rabbis altered her words, although her intention was for the good, the angel of death began to make trouble for them until they sent her away because of this, and then they were able to return to their tranquility. This is no need to dwell on the length since it's dictated by common sense and born out of reason. So I'm not familiar again with this story here. Believe it or not, don't know all Shas by heart. But I will highlight what I said before, that there is space for lying when appropriate. And this is a very hard thing to navigate. And Chaisuri and Adina, I can tell you already preemptively, if you're going to say, what's the halacha? It doesn't work that way. Right? There are certain concepts and philosophies that you can use as a guiding principle to navigate certain situation and ask your rebbeim. But we know famously in the Gemara, I'm sorry, in the Parsha, in Parsha Lech Lecha or Vayera. Vayera. No, Lech Lecha. I'm sorry. I don't know. Okay, I didn't, whatever. Basically, that Hashem, or if anybody knows, please help correct. But anyway, basically, the famous mashal of the white lie from Hashem himself, where Hashem went and Sarah was basically informed that she was going to get pregnant, and she laughed, and one of the subjects of the laugh was her husband. She's like, "My husband's so old. Do you think we're going to have a kid?" And when Hashem relayed over to Avram what was going on, he changed the words very much and did not highlight that she had laughed at him, but that rather that she was laughing at herself or the situation. And how can Hashem lie? It literally said there in a couple of psukim before, like exactly what he said, and yet he now hear it differently, which is a very important milah, right? If we're supposed to halachta b'drachav in Hashem's ways, that if Hashem is lying for what? To keep the peace, to keep the peace. So there are some people who go to the fullest extent to the extreme in terms of truthness, and again, this is something very, very hard to navigate. Find myself in these situations a lot because I'm like to be part of the Talmidim Shal Aaron, who, Oyev Shalom, Verodev Shalom, Oyev Esabrisa Mekarvan Latara. That's what he did. He went around and he tried to bring people together. He would go over and say, hey, this person thinks you're incredible and stuff like that. So, and if you're required, in order for the pursuit of truth. Now, there are times where there are certain kids who are actually very foolish. They want to be so MSDick that they're to the strict letter of the law that they will not compromise. They want to be truthful, truthful, truthful. But being truthful in the wrong circumstances or the wrong environment or the wrong context and revealing information that shouldn't be revealed, that's going to upset other people and whatever. I'm too tired to think of like a concrete example, but like, well, I guess maybe not. How do I look in this? Yeah, you look fat. You got to change. Oh, you're being such a good friend. Now, like sometimes in life, you got to like not be so totally, totally transparent and honest. But you have to be so careful because again, like when we talk about conditioning yourself, right? You condition yourself that if you're okay and you're constantly doing something, that eventually you're just going to become more comfortable with it. And then who's to say it's going to stay within the boundaries that you think are appropriate and then dive out into something a little bit more destructive. But it's a hard thing to navigate. I don't know if anyone's ever been in that situation before, but that's go seek advice. Go ask somebody and talk it out, and hopefully Hashem will give the person the clarity as to what they should or shouldn't do in that situation. Okay. The first aspect of okay, we're moving on. We're moving on. So that ends the segment on lying. We shouldn't do it. So don't lie, kids. Not good. And try to be as truthful as you possibly can. Try to be open and as honest as you can in all things. And again, when looking in the context of Zahirus, person has to look at themselves and they say like, okay, I said that way. It wasn't fully truth. Should I go back now and like tell the person I was okay, so you have to be normal and pragmatic and okay, is that going to create strife or is it just like a lesson for me internally? Don't do that again. Don't share the story in that way again or something like that. But to each his own. You have to have a lot of zeros, a lot of self-awareness and make sure that you're not getting into a habit which can be extremely destructive. Okay. Chil Hashem. Next. It's supposed to Kiddush Hashem. Um, This is also, I think, a very difficult one. Just to zoom out and frame for a moment what is Kiddush Hashem and what is Chil Hashem, terms that everyone here has heard of, I'm sure, right? Right, I hope so. Our entire purpose, the job of the Jew, essentially, our entire mission is to Mikadei Shem Shemayim, meaning that God chose us to be the ambassadors of God to do what? Our goal, our job is to reveal godliness in this world. That is literally what we are supposed to do. Through our free will and through our actions, Hakol Yidei Shemayim, Chutz Yirah Shemayim, fear of awe, but go about and increasing our making a Kiddush Hashem, revealing godliness. If it's elevating something physical to something spiritual, if it's giving the Shem Tov of God, wow, bless you and bless your God. That's what we're meant to be doing. Now, if you look at it on both sides of the spectrum, if the greatest thing you can do is a Kiddush Hashem, right? And again, like why is somebody when we say somebody dies at Al Kiddush Hashem, somebody who was murdered at the Nova Festival, they died Al Kiddush Hashem. Why? Because the only reason they died was because they were Jews. And when a person looks at that situation, that the ultimate sacrifice was made, whether or not like they didn't have to choose it, the person who killed them chose it because they were Jewish. And that sheds light into the morality of God. Why is someone murdering a Jew? It must be because of what the Jew represents, right? So the ultimate sacrifice of revealing godliness in this world. Kiddush Hashem. Now there's Chil Hashem. That's on the other side of the spectrum. Chil Hashem is probably the worst thing you could possibly do because if Hashem is appointing you for a certain job, it's one thing to be lazy and to slack off on your job, but to go in the total opposite and make a bad name for Hashem. And you see this when Jews act unbecoming of themselves, and you see them in the news and in the media, and people who do things that are fraudulent or they do things that are immoral and unjust, right? It creates such a bad name. Look at these Jews, right? There couldn't be. You look at those mentally ill Naturi Karta marching through the streets with the enemies who want to murder us, and it's just like. And then you see our enemies sitting there going like, look, you see, we hate Zionists and not Jews. Look, these Jews are great. They're marching with us. It's such a desecration of Hashem's name, and it's horrible because it's literally what we're fighting to overcome. So Chil Hashem comes in layers. There's a lot of different ways that a person can desecrate Hashem's name. There are things that are, for the mere fact that the Jewish people are still in Gullus. It's a total Chil Hashem. It's a total chil Hashem, you know? God's glory should be shining out to the entire world. When Mashiach comes and Hashem reveals himself and the entire world is filled with godliness, that's a Kiddush Hashem. Everyone is basking in the light of godliness. And now, when we're not, we're in this hidden state where there's so much schmutz in the world. Of course, that's a chil Hashem. And we have to do something about it. That's literally our job. So the diverse aspect of chil Hashem are also numerous of a major significance. A person must defend his master's honor staunchly, and as all his actions, he must reflect and deliberate carefully that no desecration of the honor of heaven should emerge from them, heaven forbid. So we've already learned in Pirkei Avos regarding the desecration of the Eternal's name. It makes no difference whether it's done intentionally or unintentionally. That is a heavy, heavy thing. That's a heavy thing to say. And the sages of blessed memory have said, what constitutes desecration of his name? Rav said, take me, a person of my stature, for example. If I were to buy meat from the butcher without paying him immediately, by buying on credit, excuse me. Take for me an example. If I were to walk 4 cubits without Torah and tefillin. Oh yeah, baby. The point here is that every person, in accordance to this, to his station, and with the way he perceives the generation, must guide his conduct to do anything, not to do anything inappropriate for someone of his stature. And at the end of the day, right, when you're a Yid, and people are getting very caught up in this like double standard to the Jews. It's not a double standard, it's a higher standard. You're a Jew, you don't act that way. You're a princess of God. You're the Bas Melech, right? What are you doing? Like, are you joking? You can't act that way. Do I need to share the Barack Obama daughter story, which I love so much? I know I've done it already 3 times this year, so we'll skip.
I've heard it too many times.
I love it though. It's
Oh
because you
yeah,
know
I don't
what?
know what you're talking about. Can you say it?
Sweet
I don't think it was
William.
this year. I think it's been like
No, I definitely. It's one of my favorite examples of all times. But yeah,
Purify is very out of you.
share
it's
it.
about the dress. No?
Share the story.
No, I don't remember fully, but like
Oh,
I like
oh,
but I butcher stories. Like I'm gonna say it wrong.
I
Like
want to
don't
hear
ask.
your version. Go, you go first.
No, you don't. I
You
always think
got
in
this,
your head,
Adina.
you can say it. That she was wearing the dress and then something happened and it was not immodest. I can't say stories. Like I just can't.
Can I guess the story? She was wearing a dress, and
I think it was
then
red.
somebody saw her in it, and then they were like, "That's not appropriate." And then they're like, "She's like, well, why do I have a double standard? Because
Yeah.
well, why do I have a double standard? She's wearing the same dress as me, so why are you yelling at me?" And they're like, "Well, your dad's
Mama's
the
daughter.
president,
So yeah.
so you have to act a different way."
Very
Yeah.
good. Very good.
Yay!
This is why
Can
we're
you
Kevin,
tell
friends.
the actual?
yeah,
Can you
yeah,
tell the
well,
actual story? I never even heard the
It
story.
was a party,
she
right?
was at a party. She was at a party, and someone snapped a picture of her. She was wearing a tank top and a short skirt, and she had a red Solo cup, and she was like dancing or whatever. And it was like
Wonderful.
a picture you would not even look twice at, but it was in the newspaper. It was like on the front page of one of these publications, and just like ripping her to shreds. And she came out afterwards. She's like all like hysterical and everything. She's just like, I'm 16 years old. Like, why can't I go to a party with all my friends? And I was like, because you're the president's daughter, and that's just not what you do. You're not like everybody else. You can't walk around when you are royalty, which essentially, I mean, in America, we're not a kingdom, but like, yeah, you're the daughter of royalty. You can't walk around like hanging out with the peasants. You just gotta recognize who you are. So, right, if a person says, okay, it's beneath my stature, this when you look at a certain people, you're just like, okay, you're holding in this area. It would be unbecoming of yourself to act in this area, right? Maybe there was a time in life, but a person has to act in public and private on par with where they're at and who they are and what their story is. Now, the funny thing is that every Jew is royalty. That's the ikker. Every single Jew has to maintain a certain standard of representing godliness and morality. That's just what it is to be a Yid. Now, granted, most Jews don't know that. They don't know how special they are, how unique they are, what the task that they're carrying, the representation that just is in their blood. They don't know that stuff, right? But for those who do, if you understand what it means to be a Yid, Ashrecha no Yisrael, like, okay, you can't act that way. You gotta act like a normal person. Right. So the greater his stature in wisdom, the more he should increase his vigilance in the matter of the divine service and his meticulous devotion to it. If he does not do so, the name of Hashem is desecrated through him, heaven forbid. For the honor of the Torah requires that one who excels in Torah learning must simultaneously excel in integrity and in the refinement of character development. Ding, ding, ding. Yes, saw it right here. If you want to take a little snapshot, a quote out this quote right here. You're talking about one of the biggest Kabbalists and Rabbanim of his time. So we'll repeat it because it had so much beauty and weight to it. For the honor of Torah requires that one who excels in Torah learning must simultaneously excel in integrity and in the refinement of character development. There is nothing worse than, and they get judged a lot. Let's be real. You grew up in Lakewood, Muncie, Bnei Brak. You grew up in a community where the second you turned bar mitzvah, you were wearing white shirts every day. You had a hat on your head. You grew up that way. So because you grew up in a community where everyone's doing it, we're going to have certain expectations from you. So now this kid who is just a regular kid, but just dresses that way because that's the way the community just dressed him up. And now he's a little bit older and does something that like, okay, anybody would want to do, like does something, that's like not the best, but whatever. And it's like, aren't you a rabbi? It's like, no, I just dress that way, hate to be incredibly, actually, I probably won't say it there, but it is right here at the top of the page, 77. There are Hasidim who go and do things that are not good, and they're dressed in the way that they're dressed simply because it's a lavush. Hey, let's talk about the Torah Karta for a second. It's just as bad, right? Like, why are they dressing that way? These are people who are sickos who lave tahor, the cult, the religious cult, who the things that they do to small girls, they're gonna rot in jail where exactly where they should be. And yet they're dressed like the most religious people out there. And people are looking and going, you see these Jews? Right? It's just like, okay, so they get judged because they're dressing a certain way, right? If I took off my kippah, if I shaved off my payas, and then you saw me, a stranger saw me sitting, chilling, and eating a cheeseburger at McDonald's on Yom Kippur, okay, well, he doesn't look Jewish at all. But yet, when you look and present yourself in a certain way, um, it's all the more so bad because it gives people again not so fairly judge them like, oh, they're not human beings, right? They're not like they're not regular people. This is a community of rabbis, so we have to hold them on a higher standard. But still, when a person who looks outwardly looks Jewish and carries themselves Jewish and is giving the persona that they're super religious and they do something that's unbecoming of a Jew to do, that is demoralizing. It's a crushing blow. You hate seeing it in the news. You hate seeing it when it's in communities and stuff like that. When this stuff comes out and people are arrested for doing horrific things. It's just like it's crazy, Bernie Madoff, which if you're familiar with biggest Ponzi scheme, out there, really, really, yeah, the guy, okay, like he's not really a from Jew and stuff like that. It doesn't look as bad versus like some rabbi of the community comes out and it turns out that he's like running some crazy financial, like embezzlement operation on the and then you see like the guy getting schlepped away with his black hat, white shirt, and cuffs. It's a terrible look for us. Terrible, terrible look for us. So a person, even though if they're going to excel in Torah learning and they're sitting there and they're becoming the best Talmud Chacham they can be, they have to equally match and devote time, right? I mean, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, the Musar movement really brought this into it. If people were only learning Torah, but now really in all the mainstream yeshivas, if you go to any mainstream yeshiva, any top yeshiva, what they do is they learn Musar before, and they'll take out the sefer, Mesilas Yesharim before, right, to remember and to give ourselves a little bit of clarity and make sure that we're not going to lose ourselves. A person needs to work on themselves and maintain integrity and grow in their character simultaneously with their Torah. If not, you are setting yourself up for a massive chilul Hashem. It doesn't matter how many mitzvahs you keep and how much Torah you learn, that if your character is to the point where you're going to do things like lie and cheat and steal, these things are going to be a terrible look for not only us, but also for Hashem. It's a massive chilul Hashem. So we can't forget that. But anyone who excels in Torah study, yet is deficient in this area, denigrates the study of Torah itself, which constitutes, heaven forbid, a desecration of the name of Hashem, blessed be one, who has given us the Holy Torah and commanded us to delve into it so that we may obtain perfection through it. Okay, that's basically what I just said. Person has to be very, very, very careful with that. Okay, let's see. All right, should we stop here? We're talking about I will do one more here. The observance of Shabbos and Yom Tov also demands great care, for their laws are numerous and stated. It's like every topic we go to, don't you feel this like sense of like, Oh boy, I'm not actually holding in this area. Shabbos may have many laws, even the rabbinic statutes, although they originate with the sages and nonetheless are of primary importance, as they have said, never take the rabbinic decrees lightly, for the prohibition on Yom Tov against the smicha, laying one's hands on the head of the animal sacrifice, that was part of the ritual to bring a carbon, is a rabbinic decree, but nevertheless, the leading Torah figures in the generation engage in dispute over it. The halachic authorities have clarified the specific of these laws under the various classifications, and they are equal with respect to their obligation to observe them and to need to treat them with vigilance. Okay, what is he saying basically? He's saying that there are lamed tests of malachos, there are 39 laws of Shabbos, and yet if you buy Hilchos Shabbos, the famous gray volume, you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of different intricacies when it comes to Shomer Shabbos or Yom Tov. What's his point? His point is, okay, yes, none of us are getting in a car and driving on Shabbos. None of us are taking out our cell phones. None of us are cooking. But when you're sitting there and you're eating your salmon and there's a bone there and you're just like, what's the big deal if I just grab it and yank it out and throw it away? Right? There are a lot of halachas when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos in terms of muksa, whatever. And there's those moments, it's like, all right, I open the freezer and the light's on. Okay, all right, I'm just gonna bump into it and quickly close it. That there are little subtleties where, again, and ignorance is not above the law when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos and Yontif, but like there are a lot of little tiny laws. You're just like, what's the big deal? Okay, I'm just going swimming for 5 minutes. Okay, like, okay, I want just rubbing the cream into my arm, whatever. It's very, he doesn't elaborate more on this, but I think for us as well, we want to be Shomer Shabbos, we want to be Yorei Shemayim, we want to, keep the halachas of Yom Tov for sure. And this is very, very easy that there'll be a situation that arises, right? Something muksa right there. There's like where it could come up where you're just like, okay, like I'm not going to be totally, totally, what's the big deal? He's stressing the importance of these derabbanans as well, their origins and where they come from, but also to take serious the rabbinic laws as well. Okay, one more paragraph and then we'll stop. What's the difficulty of the masses to confront in the prohibition against work and against the discussion of business matters? The prohibition has spilled out by the prophets. You shall honor Shabbos by abstaining your affairs, by reframing your wants, and by not engaging in prohibited speech. This is why. This is another great example. On Shabbos, it is against the rules, the laws of Shabbos, to talk about business and mundane affairs. So famously, the going joke is in the back of the shul for all the real estate deals that are being closed in the middle of Shacharis, right? You say, oh, like Shabbos. Oh my God, Shabbos Nishka Brooks. I always say, I forgot the actual term now. Um, Shabbos Nishkaret, right? If you say that, it's like, oh, we're not really talking about it on Shabbos. So and then they dive into like the details of actually closing the deals up until short of like signing an actual contract. But it's very, very problematic. For myself, it drives me crazy. You walk around shul, it's the only thing people want to talk about is money and what deals they have, what deals they don't have. And it's like you're not supposed to do this, like literally not supposed to do this. But it's very easy. It's very tempting, right? If you're working all week and you're making deals and you're making the money, and then like you come to the kiddush and this is your social event, and like what do you want to talk about? Like your entire week. You don't particularly like your family, so all you want to talk about is just, your love for the office. Eh? The rule is that any act which is prohibited on Shabbos may not be promoted or mentioned at all. Therefore, the sages prohibited one from inspecting his possessions in preparation for the next day, or walking on Shabbos in the outskirts of the city in order to be able to reach the bathhouse quickly after dark. And they forbade one from saying, I will do such and such tomorrow after Shabbos, or I will buy these goods tomorrow, and the like, right? Making plans for after Shabbos, Zilzal Shabbos, things like that. Very, very common, very easy to find yourself susceptible to. So therefore, if a person wants to be, again, a nucky for Shabbos, then a person has to tap in, really, really lock in, and make sure that even on the subtleties, on the little things, oh, it's just a bone. It's just a couple of quarters. We will continue. Okay, we got a little bit of ground over here. 12 more pages. But yeah, we'll pick it up next week. We'll continue on this journey. And if the point is not drilled in at this point, then there is no hope for you. I'm joking. Continue to learn, steig and strive and chip away until it actually does make sense. Okay, any questions on what we learned tonight? Or we'll end the recording and dive into Stern Prom. Um,
I have a question.
yeah.
What does like he started talking about like Shabbat and like business and stuff, but like does that also like relate to the lying part, or is he's just moving on?
No, we're moving on. We're talking
Okay.
about right. We finished with the lying. The lying is also he'll bring up a specific topic and then talk about how it relates to the broader chapter, which is the subtleties in messing up in that area, right? Being squeaky clean in that area. So with lying, it's very right. It's like, okay, we're not talking about someone who just fabricates stories. We're talking about somebody who like okay, they'll embellish a little bit here and there, and the dangers of what, if a person wants to really tap into the midah of Nikias, they're going to remove that from them. So with Shabbos is also just a very easy and common thing. It's very easy for someone to say, I'm not gonna like take this so serious. It's a little dirabanan law. Like, does it really matter if I this or whatever? Like small little issues. There's some people who like again, it drives me crazy. Like on Shabbos, like kids, they'll sit there. We're sitting in a park, like for no reason, they're just sitting there just ripping up leaves. And it's like because it's like a fidget spinner. Like, what are you doing? Like, you don't need to be doing that. It's like, oh, it's just a leaf. Like, it's not just a leaf. You're being Michal Shabbos. Right? It's not something, again, none of us are going to outright do malacha or touch muksa or violate any of the shop. None of us are going to outright do that. But being careful to the degree, not like, ooh, I bumped into the light switch or like, who has a kid? 4? That's old enough, like that's the whole thing. It's about being like pure in terms of how you keep Shabbos to the letter of the law. So that's why he brought that up. Because we all know, I'm saying it's common. You're always around people on Shabbos who just don't care, or like they're keeping Shabbos, but like, what's the big deal if I just quickly check my phone real quick? That type of stuff. That's gotta go bye-bye. Shkoyach, everyone. Again, apologies for being half asleep, but promise all for good things. Mr. Hashem will be back next Monday night at our regular